The wind off the Montana plains didn't care about a man's troubles. It cut through fabric and skin alike, indifferent to whether you were rich or poor, hopeful or hollow. Elias Granger stood on the platform of the train station, collar pulled up against the cold, watching steam rise from the locomotive like ghosts escaping iron. He wasn't a romantic man, never had been. Romance was for people who had time to dream, and Elias had spent the last 3 years just trying to survive. The ranch demanded everything: his sweat, his sleep, his sanity. After Martha died, the house had become a mausoleum. Meals were whatever didn't require thought. Laundry piled up until he ran out of clean shirts. The garden she'd loved turned to weeds. He'd hired help twice. Both times, young men from town who lasted less than a month before the isolation drove them back to civilization. The work was hard, sure, but it wasn't the work that broke them. It was the silence, the endless, suffocating silence of a house where nothing lived except regret. So he'd done what desperate men do. He'd placed an advertisement. Rancher seeks practical woman for partnership. Room, board, fair treatment guaranteed. Montana territory. No romantic expectations. The responses had surprised him. 7 letters, each one carefully written, each one dancing around the same truth. Desperation recognized desperation. He'd chosen Lydia Cross because her letter was the most honest. No flowery language, no false promises. Just a simple statement. I need a fresh start. You need help. That seems fair. Fair. He could work with fair. The train shuddered to a stop, brakes screaming against steel. Elias straightened his hat and tried to remember what he'd written about himself. 6'1", brown hair going gray, 38 years old. He'd sent a photograph taken 2 years ago, before the weight of everything had settled into the lines around his eyes. Passengers began to disembark. A banker type in a wool suit. A family with 3 children, the mother already looking exhausted. 2 cowboys, young and cocky, probably heading to the mines. An older woman who moved like she'd traveled too far, too long. And then, her. Elias knew it was Lydia before she even looked up. She moved differently than the others. Careful. Measured. Like someone who'd learned that the world was full of things that could hurt you if you weren't paying attention. She was smaller than he'd expected. The photograph she'd sent showed a woman with dark hair pulled back severe, eyes that looked directly at the camera without flinching. But photographs didn't show everything. Couldn't show everything. The left side of her face was a landscape of old burns. The scars ran from her temple down to her jaw, pulling the corner of her mouth into a permanent, slight downturn. The skin was mottled, tight in places, loose in others. Her ear on that side was partially melted away. Hair didn't grow there anymore, just smooth, shiny tissue that caught the light wrong. Elias felt something twist in his chest. Not revulsion exactly. More like the sudden vertiginous feeling of standing at the edge of a cliff you didn't know was there. This wasn't what he'd expected. This wasn't the practical arrangement he'd imagined. Lydia's eyes found his across the platform. She knew. Of course she knew. She'd lived with people's reactions long enough to recognize them instantly, the moment of shock, the quick recovery, the forced neutrality that never quite reached the eyes. She stopped walking. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. The wind pushed between them, carrying steam and coal smoke and the smell of distance. Other passengers moved around them like water around stones. Elias thought about Martha, about the promises he'd made and broken, about the 3 years he'd spent learning that loneliness could kill you slower than any disease. He thought about the easy thing, turning around, making an excuse, sending her back where she came from with enough money for the ticket and a story about a mistake. Instead, he walked forward. Miss Cross? Her hand came up instinctively to the scarred side of her face, not quite covering it, but close. A gesture so automatic she probably didn't even know she was doing it. Mr. Granger? Her voice was steady, lower than he'd expected. There was gravel in it, like maybe the burns had gone deeper than just skin. You had a good trip? Long. She didn't smile. But good enough. He reached for her bag. She pulled it back slightly, then forced herself to let him take it. It was heavy, everything she owned in the world, probably. That thought made something ache in his chest. The wagon's this way. They walked in silence. The town of Bitterroot wasn't much. One main street with buildings that looked like they'd been thrown up in a hurry and never improved. A general store. A saloon. a church with a steeple that leaned slightly west. People on the boardwalk stopped what they were doing to stare. Elias felt their eyes like brands, felt Lydia feel them too, in the way her shoulders came up, her head went down. "Ignore them," he said quietly. "I always do." The wagon was old but serviceable. He helped her up. She moved carefully, like someone used to managing pain, and climbed up beside her. The horse knew the way home. Elias let the reins stay loose. They rode for 20 minutes without speaking. The town fell away behind them, replaced by rolling grassland that stretched to the mountains. The sky was enormous out here, so big it made you feel small in a way that could either crush you or free you, depending on what you brought to it. "Your letter," Lydia said finally. "You said no romantic expectations." "I meant it." "Good." She was looking straight ahead, not at him. "Because I'm not capable of that anymore." "What happened?" The question came out before he could stop it. "I'm sorry, that's not a fire." Her voice was flat, factual. 7 years ago. I was engaged. After I healed, he decided he couldn't look at me anymore. Can't blame him, really. I can barely look at myself. Elias didn't know what to say to that. What could you say? That she was wrong? That it didn't matter? Both would be lies, and she'd heard enough lies. "I'm not looking for pity," she continued. "I'm looking for work, for a place where I can be useful. Your letter said fair treatment. That's all I want." "You'll get it?" She glanced at him then, really looked at him. Her right eye was brown, unremarkable. The left eye, surrounded by scar tissue, seemed darker, harder. "We'll see." The ranch appeared gradually. First the fence line, then the barn, then the house itself. It was a solid structure, 2 stories, built by someone who knew Montana winters. But even from a distance, you could see the neglect. Peeling paint, sagging porch rail, windows that needed washing. Lydia studied it without comment. Elias pulled the wagon to a stop and climbed down, reaching up to help her. She hesitated, then took his hand. Her palm was calloused. She'd done hard work before. "I'll show you the house," he said. Inside was worse than outside. Dust everywhere, dishes piled in the sink, floors that needed scrubbing. The whole place had the stale smell of a space where nothing good had happened in a long time. Lydia walked through slowly, taking inventory. She ran a finger along the mantel, looked at the dust, said nothing. "Your room's upstairs," Elias said. "First door on the right. I'm at the end of the hall. There's a lock on your door if you want to use it." "Will I need to?" He met her eyes. "No," she nodded. "Then I won't. I'll get your bag." I'll get it." When he came back with her bag, she was standing in the kitchen, looking at the catastrophe. "When did your wife pass?" 3 years ago, February. "And you haven't had anyone to help since?" "Tried. Didn't work out." She turned to face him. "I'm not afraid of work, Mr. Granger, but I need to know what you expect. What this arrangement actually is." Elias set the bag down. "I expect you to help run this house, cooking, cleaning, mending, whatever needs doing. In return, you get room, board, and a wage, $20 a month. That's generous?" "It's fair, you'll earn it." He paused. "There's one more thing. I need you to understand this isn't... I'm not looking for a wife. Not really. I'm looking for a partner. Someone to help keep this place from falling apart. And if people in town assume differently, let them assume. That's easy for you to say." There was an edge to her voice now. "You're not the one they'll be talking about." He wanted to argue, to say she was wrong, but she wasn't. "You're right. I'm sorry." Lydia studied him for a long moment. "You're apologizing a lot for a man who isn't looking for romance." "I'm trying to be decent." "Try harder." She picked up her bag. "I'd like to settle in." "What time's dinner?" 6. "I'll have something ready by then." She climbed the stairs, her footsteps slow but steady. Elias listened to the sound of her door opening, closing, then silence. He stood in the kitchen, surrounded by his own failure, and wondered what the hell he'd just done. 1. The first week they barely spoke. Lydia worked from dawn until well past dark, attacking the house like it was a personal enemy. She scrubbed floors on her hands and knees, she beat rugs until the dust clouds made her cough. She washed windows until they actually let light through again. Elias watched from a distance, unsure how to help, unwilling to get in the way. He stuck to his routines, feeding livestock, mending fence, checking water levels. The work he knew, the work that didn't require talking, but he couldn't help noticing things. The way she moved in the morning, stiff until her body warmed up. The way she turned her scarred side away from windows, from light, from him. The way she ate alone, always, even when he was sitting right there. She was good at being invisible. Too good. On the 8th day, he came in from the barn to find her halfway up a ladder, trying to fix a loose shutter. The ladder was old, unsteady. One leg was shorter than the others. "That's not safe," he said. "Neither is leaving it loose. Wind'll tear it off. Let me do it. I can manage." "I know you can. Let me do it anyway." She looked down at him, and for the first time something flickered across her face that might have been gratitude, or maybe just exhaustion. She climbed down carefully. He fixed the shutter in 5 minutes. When he came down, she was standing with her arms crossed, looking at the house like she was calculating something. "It needs paint," she said. "I know. And the porch rail's rotting." "I know that too. When's the last time you did any maintenance?" He didn't answer. She made a small sound, might have been a laugh. "You've been busy dying out here, haven't you?" The words hit like a fist. Not because they were cruel, they weren't, but because they were true. "Yeah," he said finally. "I guess I have." Lydia turned to look at him fully, both sides of her face visible. "So have I. Difference is, I'm done with it. Are you?" Elias didn't have an answer for that. She went back inside, leaving him standing in the yard with a hammer in his hand and a question he wasn't ready to answer. 2 weeks in, they developed a rhythm. She cooked. He provided game and supplies. She cleaned. He maintained the structures. She mended. He broke things that needed mending. It wasn't friendship, exactly. More like a careful dance where both people knew the steps but refused to acknowledge they were dancing. The house began to transform. Slowly, painfully, but transformed nonetheless. Surfaces that had been dull started to shine. Rooms that had been cold started to feel lived in. The kitchen, especially, came back to life. Lydia could cook, really cook, and the smells that came from that room were enough to make Elias remember what it felt like to look forward to something. But she still built walls. Every conversation was transactional, every interaction careful. She never stayed in a room after the work was done, never sat with him after dinner, never, ever let her guard down. He wanted to tell her she didn't have to be so careful, that he wasn't going to hurt her. But words had never been his strength, and besides, what did he know about what she'd been through? What gave him the right to tell her how to survive? On a Tuesday, 3 weeks after her arrival, he made a decision. "We need to go to town Saturday," he said over breakfast. Her spoon stopped halfway to her mouth. "We?" "Supplies. Few things for the house. Won't take long." "You can go alone." "Could, but I need your input on some things. Colors for paint, fabric for curtains, that kind of thing." She set her spoon down carefully. "I don't go to town." "Why not?" "You know why." "Because people stare?" "Because people do more than stare." Her voice had gone hard. "They whisper, they point. They make sure their children don't get too close, like I'm contagious. I've lived through that enough times. I don't need to do it again." Elias nodded slowly. "Okay. Okay. You don't want to go, you don't have to go. I'll pick things out myself, probably get it all wrong, but that's my problem." He stood up, carried his plate to the sink, and headed for the door. "Wait." He stopped. Lydia was gripping the edge of the table. "Why do you need me to go?" "I don't need you to. I just thought—" He turned to face her. "You're not a secret, Lydia. You live here, work here. People are going to know about you eventually. Might as well be on our terms instead of theirs." "Our terms?" She laughed, bitter. "You still don't understand. There are no our terms. There's only their terms, and we live by them or we suffer." "Maybe. Or maybe we stop giving them that power." "Easy for you to say." "Probably." He put his hat on. "But I meant what I said in my letter. Fair treatment. That includes not making you hide." He left before she could respond. Saturday morning came cold and clear. Elias hitched up the wagon, loaded the empty supply crates, and was about to climb up when the front door opened. Lydia stood there, dressed in her best dress, dark blue, simple, with a high collar and long sleeves. She'd pulled her hair back on the right side, let it fall forward on the left, partially covering the scars. But not completely. Never completely. "I'm coming," she said. You don't have to. I know." She walked to the wagon. "But you're right. I'm tired of hiding." The ride to town took 45 minutes. They didn't talk much. The closer they got to Bitterroot, the more Elias could feel the tension radiating off her. Her hands were clenched in her lap. Her breathing had gone shallow. "You okay?" he asked. "No, but I will be." Bitterroot on a Saturday was busier than usual. Farmers coming in for supplies, families doing their weekly shopping. The saloon already had a few early customers, men with nothing better to do than start drinking before noon. Elias pulled the wagon up in front of the general store and set the brake. Around them, he could feel attention shifting, heads turning, conversations stopping. Lydia sat very still. "Ready?" he asked. No, but she climbed down anyway. They walked into the store together. Inside, Mrs. Patterson stood behind the counter, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. She looked up when they entered, and Elias watched the progression of reactions cross her face. Curiosity, recognition, shock, and finally, poorly concealed distaste. "Mr. Granger," she said, "didn't expect to see you today. Need supplies." He handed her a list. "And Miss Cross here needs to look at fabrics for curtains." Mrs. Patterson's eyes slid to Lydia, then quickly away. "Fabrics are in the back." Lydia moved past her without a word, heading to where bolts of cloth were stacked. Elias followed, leaving Mrs. Patterson to gather his supplies. In the back of the store, away from the front windows, Lydia ran her hand over different fabrics. Her fingers were trembling slightly. "This one," she said, pointing to a simple cream-colored cotton. "It'll let light through without being too thin." "Sounds good. And this for the kitchen." A cheerful yellow print. "Brighten things up." "Whatever you think." She looked at him. "You're really going to let me make all these decisions?" "It's your house, too." Something passed across her face. Surprise, maybe, or the beginning of something else. But before she could respond, a voice cut through the quiet. Well, Elias Granger, heard you got yourself a new housekeeper." Victor Hale stood at the end of the aisle, smiling like a wolf. He was a big man, broad-shouldered and thick through the middle, with iron gray hair and eyes that never stopped calculating. He owned the largest ranch in the valley and most of the politicians in the territory. When Victor Hale spoke, people listened. When he didn't like something, it had a way of disappearing. Elias straightened. "Victor, heard she came all the way from Kansas. Mail order, is that right?" Victor's eyes moved to Lydia and his smile widened. My. They didn't mention that part in the advertisement, did they? Lydia's hand came up instinctively to her face. "We're just shopping, Victor," Elias said quietly. "Oh, I'm sure you are. Just friendly advice, though. You might want to keep her out of town on busy days. People talk, you know. Wouldn't want to make folks uncomfortable." The words hung in the air, ugly and deliberate. Elias felt anger rise in his chest, hot and sharp. But alongside it came something else. Fear. Fear of confrontation, of making things worse, of standing up to a man who could make life very difficult if he wanted to. He should have said something, anything, should have defended her, told Victor to go to hell, made it clear that Lydia belonged here as much as anyone. Instead, he said nothing. The silence stretched out, long and terrible. Victor's smile grew. "That's what I thought. Good seeing you, Elias." "Miss Cross, was it? Welcome to Bitterroot." He walked away, boots loud on the wooden floor. Elias turned to Lydia. "I'm sorry. I should have—" "Don't." Her voice was cold. "We should go." "Let me—" "I said we should go." She walked past him, moving fast, back straight. He followed, feeling like the worst kind of coward. Mrs. Patterson rang up their purchases in silence, her lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. Other customers watched from corners, whispering behind hands. Outside, Lydia climbed into the wagon without waiting for help. Elias loaded the supplies and climbed up beside her. The ride back was excruciating. She stared straight ahead, not speaking, not crying, just existing in a space somewhere beyond anger. When they got back to the ranch, she climbed down and headed straight for the house. Lydia, I need to be alone right now. Please, let me explain. She turned on him, and for the first time he saw real fury in her eyes. Explain what? That you froze? That you let him humiliate me and said nothing? That when it actually mattered, you chose silence over courage? I was trying not to make things worse. For who? For me? Or for you? She stepped closer. I've lived with shame my entire adult life, Mr. Granger. I know what it looks like. I know what it feels like. And I saw it on your face in that store. Shame that I was standing next to you. That's not true, isn't it? Her voice cracked. Because from where I stood, it looked exactly like that. She went inside and closed the door, not quite slamming it, but close. Elias stood in the yard, supplies still in the wagon, and felt the weight of his failure settle over him like a shroud. The next 3 days were the longest of his life. Lydia still worked, still cooked, still maintained the house with the same ruthless efficiency. But the careful distance she'd maintained before became a chasm. She wouldn't look at him, wouldn't speak unless absolutely necessary, would leave a room if he entered it. He tried to apologize, tried to explain, but every word came out wrong, inadequate. How do you apologize for being a coward? How do you explain that you wanted to be brave, but couldn't find it in yourself when it mattered? On the 4th day, he found a letter on the kitchen table. Mr. Granger, I appreciate the opportunity you gave me. The wages you promised will more than cover passage back to Kansas. I'll be leaving at the end of the month. I've made a list of everything that needs doing before winter. Any capable woman should be able to manage it. I was wrong to think this arrangement could work. The problem isn't your town or your neighbors. The problem is that I forgot what I learned 7 years ago, that there's only so much a person can endure before it breaks them. I thought I was strong enough. I was wrong. L.C. Elias read the letter 3 times. Then he folded it carefully and put it in his pocket. That night he didn't sleep. He sat in the dark, listening to the house creak around him, thinking about everything he'd lost and everything he was about to lose. Martha used to tell him he was too careful, that he held himself back from living because he was afraid of getting hurt. He'd denied it at the time, but she'd been right. She'd always been right. After she died, the careful became extreme. He'd locked himself away, told himself it was grief, but really it was just more of the same. Fear dressed up as protection. And now here was Lydia, offering him a chance at something real, something living, and he was going to let fear win again. Morning came gray and cold. Elias got up, did his chores, came back inside. Lydia was making breakfast, her movements precise and mechanical. I read your letter, he said. Then you know I'm leaving. Don't. She stopped, spatula in hand. Why not? Because I was wrong, in town. I was a coward, and I was wrong, and I'm asking you to give me another chance. Why should I? Because, the words stuck in his throat, he forced them out. Because I don't want to lose this. Whatever this is. I don't want to lose it. Lydia turned to face him. Whatever this is? You don't even know, do you? You just know you don't want to be alone again. That's not... It is. It's exactly that. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I can't be your cure for loneliness, Elias. I can't be the thing that makes your life bearable while you're ashamed of me at the same time. That's not fair treatment. That's not partnership. That's me being useful while remaining invisible. You're not invisible. In that store I was. In your silence I was. She set the spatula down. I've been invisible before. I won't be invisible again. He wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, but every word she spoke landed like truth. I understand, he said finally. I'm sorry. She nodded, picked up the spatula, went back to cooking. And Elias went back outside to a day that felt darker than any winter. 3 days later, the weather turned. Storm clouds rolled in from the west, heavy and low, promising snow. The temperature dropped fast. Elias worked quickly, securing everything that needed securing, getting the livestock under cover, checking that the barn doors would hold. He was hammering down a loose board when he heard it, a sound that didn't belong. Wrong pitch, wrong rhythm. He stopped, listened. There it was again, coming from the north pasture. He grabbed a lantern and headed out into the gathering dark. The wind had teeth now, cutting through his coat like it wasn't there. Snow was starting to fall, thick flakes that stuck to everything. The sound came again, bleeding, panicked. He found her at the base of the north fence, one of his ewes, caught in a tangle of wire and wood where the fence had partially collapsed. She was cut in several places, bleeding, terrified. And she wasn't alone. There was a lamb, newborn by the look of it, lying in the snow nearby. Elias swore it was too early for lambing. The lamb shouldn't be here for another month. He approached carefully, talking low to keep the ewe calm. The wire had wrapped around her hind leg, cutting deep. He'd need tools to get her free, and he'd need to move fast. The lamb wouldn't survive long in this cold. He was trying to work the wire loose when he heard footsteps behind him. Lydia appeared out of the snow, wrapped in a heavy shawl, carrying blankets and a knife. "What are you?" Saw you run out. Figured you'd need help." She knelt beside the lamb without hesitation, wrapping it in a blanket, checking for breath. "It's alive. Barely." "The mother's caught. I'll handle the lamb. You free her." They worked in the howling dark, snow building around them. Elias cut wire while Lydia coaxed life back into the lamb, breathing warmth over its muzzle, rubbing its chest. The ewe struggled, making everything harder, but finally the last piece of wire came free. "Got her," Elias said. The ewe tried to stand and collapsed. Her leg was bad. Not broken, but badly torn. She'd need stitches, antibiotics, careful monitoring. "Can you carry the lamb?" he asked. "Yes." "I'll get her mother." He lifted the ewe. She was heavier than she looked, and furious, and started back toward the barn. Lydia walked beside him, the lamb bundled against her chest, protecting it from the wind with her own body. It took 20 minutes to reach the barn. By the time they got inside, they were both covered in snow and blood, exhausted, frozen. But they didn't stop. Elias cleaned and stitched the ewe's wounds while Lydia set up a warming area for the lamb. They worked in tandem, anticipating each other's movements, passing tools without asking. The storm raged outside. Inside, there was only work and warmth and the gradual sense that both animals would survive. Finally, with the ewe settled and the lamb nursing, they collapsed against a hay bale, breathing hard. "Thank you," Elias said. "I couldn't have done that alone." "Yes, you could have." "Not as well." She didn't argue with that. They sat in silence, listening to the storm. The lamp cast long shadows. The animals made small sounds of comfort. "Why did you come out?" he asked. "You could have stayed inside where it was safe." Lydia was quiet for a long time. "Because that's not who I am. I don't stay inside where it's safe. I never have." "Even when people hurt you?" "Especially then." She looked at him, and in the lamplight, her scars seemed less like damage and more like proof of survival. "My whole life, people have tried to make me small, tried to make me hide. And for a long time, I let them. But then I woke up one day and realized they don't get to decide. I do. That's brave." "No, it's not. Brave would be never feeling afraid. What I am is tired. Tired of letting fear make my decisions." Elias nodded slowly. "I've let fear make mine for years now." "I know." "Martha used to call me on it. Said I was going to hide myself to death." "She sounds smart." "She was." He smiled sadly. "Used to drive me crazy, how right she always was." "What would she say about me? About this arrangement?" He thought about it, really thought. "She'd say I was an idiot for hesitating. She'd say you're exactly what this place needs. And she'd probably like you better than she liked me." Lydia laughed, a real laugh, the first he'd heard from her. It transformed her face, made her look younger, lighter. "Well, your wife had good taste." "In everything except husbands." They sat there, two damaged people in a barn during a storm. And for the first time since she'd arrived, the silence between them didn't feel heavy. It felt like possibility. "Lydia," he said carefully, "I need to tell you something." "All right." When Victor said those things in town, I froze. Not because I was ashamed of you, but because I was afraid of confrontation, afraid of making things worse, afraid of standing up to him because he has power and I don't. He turned to look at her. "But the truth is, none of that matters. I should have stood up anyway, should have made it clear that you belong here, that you're not something to be hidden or ashamed of." I failed you. I'm sorry. She was quiet, searching his face. Do you know what hurts most? It's not what he said. I've heard worse. It's that for a moment, I thought maybe you were different. Maybe you actually saw me as a person instead of a problem. And then you proved you were just like everyone else. The words cut deep, but he didn't look away. You're right. I was like everyone else, but I don't want to be. I want to be better. Wanting isn't enough. I know. That's why I'm asking. Give me a chance to show you. Don't leave yet. Give me until the end of winter. If I haven't proven myself by then, I'll pay for your passage myself. Why should I believe you'll change? Because I have to. His voice was raw now, honest in a way he hadn't been in years. Because if I don't, I'm going to spend the rest of my life in this barn, hiding from everything that matters. And I'm tired, Lydia. I'm so damn tired of being afraid. She looked at him for a long time. Outside, the storm was reaching its peak, wind howling like something alive. Inside, 2 people and 2 animals breathed together in the warmth. Until the end of winter, she said finally. You'll stay? I'll stay, but Elias, she held his gaze. If you freeze up again, if you let someone humiliate me and say nothing, I'm gone. No second chances after that. Understood? Understood. She stood up, brushing hay from her dress. We should get back to the house. It's late. Lydia? She stopped. Thank you. For coming out in the storm. For helping. For staying. She nodded once, then headed for the door. Elias watched her go, silhouetted against the snow, and felt something shift inside his chest. Something that had been frozen for 3 years starting, finally, to thaw. He checked on the animals one more time, then followed her back into the storm, back toward a house that was slowly becoming a home, back toward a future he was just beginning to believe might be possible. The hard part was done. They'd both agreed to try. Now came the harder part, actually doing it. The storm broke sometime before dawn, leaving the world wrapped in silence and snow. Elias woke to light filtering through frost-covered windows, brighter than it should have been. He dressed quickly and headed downstairs, following the smell of coffee. Lydia was already in the kitchen, kneading dough with steady, practiced movements. She'd pulled her hair back completely today, not bothering to hide the scars. It was such a small thing, but it felt enormous. Morning, he said. Coffee's ready? Breakfast in 20 minutes? He poured himself a cup and stood by the window, looking out at the transformed landscape. Everything was white, clean, untouched, like the world had started over while they slept. How's the ewe? Lydia asked without looking up. I checked on her an hour ago, eating, the lamb's nursing well. Good. He watched her work, the rhythm of it, the competence. Where'd you learn to handle animals like that? My father had a farm, before the fire. She divided the dough into sections. He taught me that panic kills faster than most injuries. Stay calm, work the problem, don't waste energy on fear. Smart man. He was. She paused, hands still on the dough. Died 2 years after the fire. Heart attack. My mother said it was his heart, but I think it was watching what happened to me. Watching his daughter become someone people cross the street to avoid. Elias didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. Sometimes silence was better than words that didn't help. Lydia shaped the dough into loaves and covered them with a cloth. He told me something before he died. Said that people will judge you by what they see, not what they know. Said the only way to survive that is to decide you don't need their approval to exist. Sounds like he understood. He understood that the world is cruel and you either accept it or fight it. He chose acceptance. I'm still deciding. They ate breakfast in a silence that had lost some of its edge. When they finished, Elias stood and gathered the plates. I can do that, Lydia said. I know, but I'm going to anyway. She raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. After the dishes were done, they spent the morning working together. Him clearing paths through the snow, her organizing supplies they'd bought in town. The yellow fabric she'd picked out was spread across the kitchen table, and she'd started measuring for curtains. Around noon, there was a knock at the door. They both froze. Out here, unexpected visitors usually meant trouble. Elias opened the door to find a boy, maybe 14, sitting on a horse that looked exhausted. The kid was wearing clothes too thin for the weather, and his lips had a blue tinge. Mr. Granger, I'm Tommy Fletcher. My pa sent me. Says, can you come? There's a problem at our place. What kind of problem? Roof collapsed. Part of it, anyway. From the snow. My ma's trapped inside with the baby, and pa can't get to her. He's trying, but... The boy's voice cracked. Please, he said you'd know what to do. Elias grabbed his coat. Where? 4 miles west, the old Miller property. I know it. He turned to Lydia. I have to go. I'm coming with you. You don't have to. If there's a baby involved, you'll need help. Don't argue. She was right, and they didn't have time to debate. 5 minutes later, they were on horseback, following Tommy through snow that was knee-deep in places. The boy rode hard, looking back every few minutes to make sure they were still following. The Fletcher place was worse than Elias expected. The house was barely standing, more cabin than home, with walls that had never been properly chinked. Part of the roof had caved in, and he could hear someone shouting inside. A man emerged from the front door as they rode up. John Fletcher, face smudged with soot and desperation. Thank God. I can't reach her. The beam's blocking the door to the back room, and I can't move it alone. Show me. Inside was chaos. The roof had collapsed right where the main support beam met the wall, bringing half the ceiling down with it. Debris was everywhere. Wood, shingles, insulation. Smoke hung in the air from a fire that had been smothered by falling snow. Mary, John shouted. Help's here. A weak voice came from behind the blocked door. John, the baby won't stop crying. I think she's hurt. Lydia was already moving, assessing the situation. We need to lift the beam and shift it sideways. If we try to drag it, the rest of the ceiling might come down. Elias looked up. She was right. The whole structure was unstable. John, you and I on this end. Tommy, find something we can use as a lever. The boy ran out and came back with a fence post. They positioned it under the beam, and all 3 men put their weight on it. The beam shifted slightly but didn't lift enough. Again, Elias grunted. They tried twice more. On the 3rd attempt, something cracked above them. Dust and small pieces of wood rained down. Stop! Lydia's voice cut through. You're making it worse. The whole thing's going to come down. Then what do we do? John's voice was breaking. I can't leave her in there. Lydia was staring at the collapsed section, thinking. The window. On the back wall. Is there one? Yes, but it's small. I can't fit through. I can. Elias understood what she was suggesting and immediately shook his head. No, it's too dangerous. You have a better idea? We'll find another way. There isn't time. She was already heading for the door. Which side of the house? John pointed. Northwest corner, but the snow's drifted high there. You'll have to dig. Then I'll dig. Elias followed her outside. Lydia, listen to me. If that roof shifts while you're in there, then it shifts. But there's a mother and a baby in there who are going to die if someone doesn't do something. She grabbed a shovel from near the barn. I'm not asking your permission. She moved fast, digging through snow that came up to her waist. Elias helped, and together they cleared enough to expose the window. It was small, maybe 2 feet square, and partially blocked by fallen debris inside. Lydia knocked on the glass. Mrs. Fletcher, can you hear me? A face appeared, a young woman, maybe 25, with wild eyes and a crying infant in her arms. Who are you? I'm here to help. Can you open the window? It's stuck. The frame's warped from the weight. Stand back. Lydia wrapped her hand in her shawl and punched through the glass. She cleared the shards quickly, efficiently, then started pulling herself through. Wait, Elias said. Let me... You won't fit. We both know it. She was halfway through already, squirming in the tight space. For a moment she got stuck, and panic flashed across her face. Then she twisted, pushed, and dropped through to the other side. Elias pressed his face to the window. You all right? Fine. Her voice was strained. Mrs. Fletcher, let me see the baby. There was movement inside, hard to see clearly. Lydia was examining the infant, running her hands carefully over the small body. She's got a cut on her head, but it's not deep, probably from falling debris. She's scared, not injured. Thank God, Mary Fletcher sobbed. I'm going to hand her out first, Lydia said. Mr. Granger, you ready? Ready. Lydia appeared at the window with the baby, wrapped in a blanket. She passed the infant through carefully. Elias took her, and the child's cries intensified at the sudden cold. He handed her to Tommy, who'd come around the corner. "Keep her warm," Elias ordered. Lydia was helping Mary toward the window now. The woman was moving slowly, favoring one leg. "I think I twisted my ankle when I fell," she said. "We'll get you looked at. Can you climb?" "I'll try." Getting Mary through the window was harder. She was bigger than Lydia, and her injured ankle made it difficult to maneuver. Halfway through, she got stuck, and Elias had to grab her arms and pull while Lydia pushed from inside. They managed it finally, and Mary collapsed in the snow, crying and laughing at the same time. "Your turn," Elias said to Lydia. "In a minute. I want to grab some things. Clothes, medicine if they have any. They can't come back here until this is fixed." Lydia, but she'd already moved away from the window. He could hear her moving around inside, opening drawers, gathering items. Above, the damaged roof creaked ominously. "Hurry," he called. "I know." She appeared again with a bundle of clothes and a small wooden box. She pushed them through, then grabbed the window frame to pull herself up. Her hand slipped on the wood and she fell back. "You okay?" "Fine, just—" She tried again, got higher this time, but her dress caught on something. She yanked at it, and there was a tearing sound. "Damn it!" Above them something groaned, not wood settling, wood failing. "Lydia, get out now!" She heard the urgency in his voice and abandoned the careful approach. She jumped, caught the window frame, and hauled herself up. Elias grabbed her arms and pulled. Her dress tore more, but she came through, and they both tumbled backward into the snow as a tremendous crash came from inside the house. They lay there, breathing hard, while dust billowed from the window. When it cleared, they could see that the entire back corner of the house had collapsed inward. "Jesus," Elias breathed. Lydia sat up, looking at the destruction. "Well, that was close. Close. That was—" He couldn't finish the sentence. The fear was too big for words. John came running around the corner, saw them both alive, and nearly collapsed with relief. "My wife, the baby—" "They're fine," Lydia said. "Tommy has your daughter. Mary's over there." She pointed. John ran to his wife, dropping to his knees beside her. They held each other, crying, while Tommy stood nearby with the baby, looking overwhelmed. Elias helped Lydia to her feet. She was covered in soot and dust, her dress torn, her hands cut from the glass. But she was grinning. "That," she said, "was terrifying." "You didn't have to do it." "Yes, I did." She looked at him. "And so did you. That's what people do, isn't it? When someone needs help, you help. Even if it's dangerous, even if it's hard." He understood what she wasn't saying, that this was a test, that she was showing him what courage looked like, what it meant to stand up when it mattered. "Come on," he said. "Let's get them back to our place. They can't stay here." The ride back was slow and careful. Mary rode with John, the baby wrapped between them. Tommy followed on his exhausted horse. Lydia and Elias brought up the rear, keeping watch to make sure no one fell behind. At the ranch, Lydia immediately took charge. She settled Mary and the baby in the guest room, made tea, cleaned and bandaged Mary's ankle. Elias and John worked on setting up temporary space in the barn for Tommy and John to sleep. By evening, the house was full of people and noise. It should have been chaotic, stressful. Instead, it felt alive in a way Elias hadn't experienced in years. The sound of a baby crying, voices and conversation, laughter from the kitchen where Lydia was teaching Tommy how to properly dice vegetables. At dinner, they all squeezed around the table. It was tight, uncomfortable, but no one complained. Mary kept thanking them, over and over, until Lydia finally put a hand on her arm. "You don't have to keep thanking us," she said gently. "You do the same." "I don't know if I would," Mary admitted. "I don't know if I'd be brave enough to crawl through a window like that." "You were trapped in a collapsed house with your baby. You were plenty brave." Mary looked at Lydia for a long moment, and Elias saw something shift in her expression. She'd noticed the scars, of course. Everyone noticed. But now she was seeing past them to the person underneath. "I'm glad you were there," Mary said simply. Lydia nodded, unable to speak. After dinner, after everyone had settled into their temporary spaces, Elias found Lydia standing on the porch, looking out at the dark. "You should be resting," he said. "Can't sleep yet. Too much energy." He came to stand beside her. "That was incredible what you did today." "It was necessary." "It was both." He paused. You could have died. So could you. So could John. That's not an excuse to do nothing. No, he agreed. It's not. They stood in silence, watching their breath form clouds in the cold air. Elias? Her voice was quieter now. When I was stuck in that window for just a second, I was back in the fire. Back in that moment when I couldn't move and everything was burning. It was... She stopped, swallowed. It was the most scared I've been since it happened. But you didn't freeze. No, I thought about freezing. Thought about how easy it would be to just give up. But then I heard that baby crying, and I thought, that's someone's whole world in there. Someone's future. And I realized I had a choice. Let fear win or push through it. That's courage. Maybe. Or maybe it's just being too stubborn to quit. She smiled slightly. Either way, I made it out. We both did. Both? She looked at him then. Really looked at him. You were ready to come in after me, weren't you? If I'd gotten stuck, if that roof had come down, you were going to come in. He didn't deny it. Yes. That's stupid. Probably. But it means something. She turned back to the darkness. I'm starting to think maybe you meant what you said, about wanting to change, about not letting fear make your decisions. I did mean it. We'll see. It wasn't quite trust, but it was close. Closer than they'd been before. Elias decided that was enough for now. Over the next week, the Fletcher family stayed with them while John worked on making his house safe enough to return to. It was crowded and noisy, and nothing like the careful distance Elias and Lydia had maintained before. But something about having other people around made it easier for them to be around each other. Mary turned out to be a natural storyteller, filling evenings with tales of her childhood in Missouri. Tommy was fascinated by the ranch and followed Elias everywhere, asking endless questions about livestock and land management. The baby, whose name was Sarah, proved to have lungs that could wake the dead and a disposition that could charm anyone who wasn't actively trying to sleep. Lydia bloomed in the chaos. Elias watched her move through the house, managing meals and laundry and 100 small crises, and realized she'd been built for this. Not solitude, but community. Not hiding, but living right in the middle of things. On the 5th day, Mary cornered Lydia in the kitchen while they were making bread. Can I ask you something personal? Mary said. Lydia's hands paused in the dough. You can ask. I might not answer. The scars. How did you... She stopped, reconsidered. I'm sorry. That's not my business. It's all right. Everyone wonders. Lydia resumed kneading. Fire. 7 years ago. House fire. I got most of my family out, but I went back for my sister's music box. Stupid thing to risk your life for. The ceiling collapsed on me. By the time they pulled me out, half my face was gone. Mary was quiet. I'm sorry. Don't be. I survived. That's more than a lot of people get. Still, it must be hard, the way people look at you. It is. Lydia shaped the dough into loaves. But I decided a long time ago that their discomfort isn't my problem. I exist whether they like it or not. You're beautiful, Mary said suddenly. Lydia laughed. You don't have to. I'm serious. Not in spite of the scars or even because of them. Just you. The way you move through the world. The way you didn't hesitate to help us, even though you didn't know us. That's beautiful. Lydia set down the dough and wiped her hands slowly. When she looked up, her eyes were wet. Thank you, she whispered. Mary reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Just that. Nothing more needed to be said. That night, Elias found Lydia in the parlor, sitting by the fire with a book she wasn't reading. You all right? He asked. Mary said something today. Called me beautiful. She's right. Lydia looked at him sharply. Don't. Don't what? Don't say things you don't mean just to be kind. I'm not. He sat down across from her. You want honesty? Fine. When you first got off that train, I was shocked, scared even. I didn't know what to do with you, but that was my failure, not yours. Elias, let me finish. These past weeks, watching you work, watching you with the Fletchers, watching you risk your life to save a woman and baby you'd never met, I've learned something. Beauty isn't about what you look like. It's about what you do when nobody's watching. It's about courage when courage is hard. And by that measure, Lydia Cross, You're the most beautiful person I've ever met." The words hung in the air between them, too honest to take back. Lydia stood abruptly. "I need to check on the bread." She left before he could respond. Elias sat in the empty parlor, listening to the fire crack and wondering if he'd just made a terrible mistake. The next morning, everything was different. Lydia was cordial but distant. Not angry, exactly. More like she'd put her walls back up, reinforced them, made sure nothing could get through. She moved through her tasks with mechanical efficiency, speaking only when necessary. Elias didn't push. He'd said what he needed to say. If it scared her, if it made things harder, that was something she'd have to work through on her own. 2 days later, John announced that their house was safe enough to return to. Got the roof patched temporary-like. Won't be pretty, but it'll keep the weather out until spring. They packed their few belongings while Mary hugged Lydia tight enough to hurt. "You ever need anything at all, you come find us. Understand?" "I will." "I mean it. You saved my baby's life. That's a debt I can never repay, but I'm going to try anyway." Tommy shook Elias's hand solemnly, trying to be grown up about it. "Thank you for teaching me about the animals, sir, and for letting us stay. You're welcome any time." They watched the Fletcher family ride away, the baby bundled tight between her parents. When they were out of sight, Elias and Lydia went back inside to a house that suddenly felt too empty. "Back to normal," Lydia said. "I guess so." But normal felt different now. The house had been full of life, and now that life was gone, the silence was heavier than before. They moved around each other carefully, both aware that something had shifted, but neither willing to name it. That afternoon, Elias went into town alone. He told himself it was for supplies, but really it was because he needed to think. The general store was quiet, only a few customers browsing the shelves. Mrs. Patterson greeted him with the same thin-lipped disapproval as always. "Mr. Granger, heard you had the Fletcher family staying with you." "That's right. Heard you're—" She paused delicately. Housekeeper was quite the hero, crawling through windows, very dramatic. There was something in her tone that set his teeth on edge. "She saved a woman and baby. I'd call that brave, not dramatic." "Oh, I'm sure it was brave. Well, people are talking. Let them talk." "Easy for you to say." Mrs. Patterson lowered her voice conspiratorially. "But some folks are saying it's not proper, her living out there with you, unmarried, unchaperoned. She has her own room." "I'm sure she does. I'm just saying appearances matter, especially for a woman in her," she gestured vaguely toward her own face, "situation. She doesn't need more reason for people to gossip." Elias set his basket down on the counter. "You know what, Mrs. Patterson? I'm tired of caring what people think. Lydia Cross is the hardest working, most decent person I've met in years. If people have a problem with her living at my ranch, they can come tell me to my face. But I'm done pretending there's anything improper about two people helping each other survive." Mrs. Patterson's eyes went wide. "Well, I never—" "No, you never do. None of you do. You just whisper and judge and make other people's lives harder because it makes you feel superior." He picked up his basket. "I'll take my business elsewhere from now on." He walked out, heart pounding, hands shaking slightly. Behind him, he could hear Mrs. Patterson sputtering with indignation. On the street, he nearly ran into Victor Hale. "Elias," Victor said, that same wolf smile on his face, "heard you made quite a scene in there. Just speaking my mind." "About your housekeeper, the scarred one." Victor's eyes glittered. "Tell me, is she worth it? All this trouble you're causing yourself?" And here it was, the moment, the choice. Elias looked at Victor Hale, at the power and wealth and casual cruelty he represented, and felt fear rise up like it always did. Fear of confrontation, fear of consequences, fear of standing alone against the world. But underneath the fear was something else, something newer. Anger. "Her name," Elias said quietly, "is Lydia Cross. And yes, she's worth it." Victor's smile faded slightly. "You're making a mistake." "Maybe, but it's my mistake to make." He walked away, leaving Victor standing in the street, and he didn't look back. The ride home was long enough for the adrenaline to fade and the doubts to creep in. He just made an enemy of the most powerful man in the valley. He'd burned bridges with the general store. He'd announced to anyone who'd listen that Lydia mattered to him, and he had no idea what he was going to do next. When he got back to the ranch, Lydia was in the garden, clearing away dead plants in preparation for spring. She looked up when he approached, wiping dirt from her hands. "You were gone a while," she said. "Had some things to take care of." "Get what you needed?" He thought about that, about Mrs. Patterson's gossip and Victor's threats, and his own anger finally finding its voice. "Yeah, I think I did." She studied his face, reading something there. "What happened?" "I'll tell you over dinner." And he did. He told her about Mrs. Patterson's insinuations and his own response, about running into Victor, about finally saying what needed to be said instead of swallowing it down. Lydia listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "You know what you just did, don't you?" she said finally. "Made things harder for both of us?" "No. You chose." She met his eyes. "You had a chance to back down, to smooth things over, to protect yourself, and you chose to stand up instead. That's—" her voice caught. "That's what I've been waiting for. I should have done it sooner. You did it now. That's what matters." They finished dinner in silence, but it was a different kind of silence than before. Lighter, fuller of possibility. Later, as they were cleaning up, Lydia spoke without looking at him. "What you said the other night about beauty, did you mean it?" "Every word." "Why?" "Because it's true, and because you deserve to hear it." She was scrubbing a pot with more force than necessary. "I don't know how to do this." "Do what?" "Let someone see me, really see me. It's easier to keep the walls up." "I know, but Lydia—" He waited until she looked at him. "You don't have to have all the walls down. Just maybe leave a door somewhere. For people who've earned it." "Have you? Earned it?" "I'm trying to." She set down the pot, dried her hands, walked over to where he stood and looked up at him. Her scarred face and her whole face, all of it, right there in the lamplight. "Okay," she said. "One door, that's all you get for now." "That's all I need." And for the first time since she'd arrived, she smiled at him. A real smile, full and genuine and so beautiful it made his chest ache. Outside, winter held the land in its grip, but inside something was beginning to thaw. The days that followed felt different, though Elias couldn't say exactly how. They worked the same routines, spoke the same words, moved through the same spaces. But there was a current underneath now, something electric and uncertain that neither of them knew quite how to navigate. Lydia had left a door open, she'd said, but she hadn't explained where it was or how to find it, and Elias was terrified of pushing too hard and losing what little ground he'd gained. So he watched, learned, noticed the small things. The way she hummed while cooking now, soft melodies he didn't recognize. The way she'd started sitting in the parlor after dinner instead of disappearing upstairs immediately. The way she sometimes forgot to turn her scarred side away from him, and how those moments felt like gifts he didn't deserve. 2 weeks after his confrontation with Victor, a letter arrived. Elias recognized the handwriting immediately. John Fletcher's careful script, each letter formed with the precision of someone who'd learned to write late in life. He opened it at the kitchen table while Lydia was making coffee. "It's from John," he said. "Everything all right?" "He's inviting us to dinner, this Saturday. Says Mary's been planning it for days and won't take no for an answer." Lydia's hand stilled on the coffee pot. "Us?" "That's what it says." She turned to look at him. "You should go. The invitation's for both of us." "I know what the invitation says. I'm telling you to go without me." Elias set the letter down. "Why?" "Because showing up at their house, sitting at their table, pretending to be something we're not, that's not fair to them." "Well, what are we pretending to be?" She made a frustrated sound. "You know what I mean." "I really don't." Lydia poured 2 cups of coffee and brought them to the table, sitting down across from him. "They're good people, Elias. They were grateful for the help, and now they want to repay the debt. But if we show up together, people will talk. They'll assume things. And John and Mary don't need that kind of trouble. Maybe they're willing to risk it. Or maybe they don't understand what they're risking." She wrapped her hands around the cup, staring into the dark liquid. "I've seen this before. Someone befriends me, thinks they can handle the consequences. Then the whispers start. The social invitations dry up. Their children get excluded from things. Eventually they realize it's not worth it, and I'm alone again. The Fletchers don't strike me as people who care what others think. Everyone cares what others think. It's just a matter of how much they can take before they break. Elias considered this. So your solution is to never let anyone close? To assume they'll abandon you before they get the chance? It's not assuming when it's happened enough times to be predictable. That's not living. That's just waiting to die. Her eyes snapped to his, sharp with anger. Easy for you to say. You're not the one people cross the street to avoid. No. But I spent 3 years hiding in this house, avoiding town, avoiding people, avoiding anything that might remind me I was still alive. We're not so different, Lydia. We're completely different. Are we? Because from where I'm sitting, we're both terrified of the same thing, that if we let ourselves care about people, they'll hurt us. The only difference is our excuses. She stood abruptly. I'm not having this conversation. Why not? Because you're pushing, and I don't like being pushed. I'm not pushing. I'm asking. He stood too, meeting her across the table. John and Mary invited us to dinner because they want to spend time with us, not out of obligation, not out of pity, because they actually like us. And you want to refuse that because you're afraid it won't last. Of course I'm afraid it won't last. Nothing good ever does. The words came out raw, honest, and immediately she regretted them. He could see it in her face, the way she pulled back, the way her hand came up like she wanted to take the words out of the air and shove them back inside. But Elias didn't look away. What if it does last? What if you're wrong? I'm not wrong. How do you know? Because... She stopped, frustrated. Because I just do. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. They stood there locked in a stalemate, until finally Lydia broke eye contact and turned toward the door. I need some air. She grabbed her coat and went outside, leaving Elias alone in the kitchen with cold coffee and a letter he didn't know how to answer. He found her an hour later in the barn, sitting on a hay bale and staring at nothing. The animals moved quietly around her, comfortable with her presence. I'm going to say something, Elias said from the doorway. And you're going to listen, and then you can decide what you want to do. She didn't tell him to leave, so he took that as permission. You're right. People will talk if we show up at the Fletchers together. They'll make assumptions about what we are to each other. Some of those assumptions will be wrong, and some of them, he paused. Some of them might not be wrong for long. Lydia looked up sharply. I'm not good at this, he continued, at saying what I mean, but I need you to understand something. When you got off that train, I was scared. Not of you, but of what you represented. Change, risk, the possibility that I might have to feel something again. And I handled it badly. I let fear make me a coward, and I hurt you because of it. Elias, let me finish. These past weeks, watching you, working alongside you, seeing the way you move through the world, you've made me want to be better, want to be brave. And I know that's not fair putting that on you, but it's the truth. He stepped closer, close enough to see the way her breath was coming faster, the way her hands were clenched tight. So here's what I'm proposing. We go to dinner at the Fletchers. Together. We let people make their assumptions. And if someone has a problem with it, they can take it up with me. Not you. Me. Because I'm done letting fear dictate how I live, and I'm done watching you do the same. Lydia was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. What if I'm not ready? Then we'll wait until you are. What if I'm never ready? Then we'll figure something else out. She looked at him, really looked at him, and he could see her working through it, weighing the risks against the possibilities, trying to decide if trust was worth the inevitable pain. One dinner, she said finally. That's all I'm agreeing to. One dinner is enough. Saturday came too quickly. Lydia changed clothes 3 times before settling on a simple gray dress with a white collar. She'd spent an hour the night before making a pie, apple, with a lattice crust that took forever to weave properly. Elias watched her fuss over it and said nothing, understanding that this was how she processed nerves. The ride to the Fletcher place was quiet. The snow had started to melt, leaving the roads muddy and treacherous. Their wagon lurched through ruts, and twice Elias had to get down and push when the wheels got stuck. Maybe this is a sign, Lydia said during the second stop. Maybe we should just go back. We're almost there. That's not what I mean. He looked up at her, mud splattered across his boots and halfway up his legs. You want to turn around? She hesitated, then shook her head. No, I'm just scared. Me too. You don't look scared. I'm very good at hiding it. That surprised a small laugh out of her, and the tension broke just enough for them to keep going. The Fletcher house looked better than it had the last time they'd seen it. John had done more than just patch the roof. He'd reinforced the walls, added proper insulation, even painted the trim. It wasn't fancy, but it looked solid, lived in. Mary met them at the door with Sarah on her hip, and the baby immediately reached for Lydia with grabbing hands. She remembers you, Mary said, delighted. Lydia took Sarah carefully, and the infant grabbed a fistful of her hair and yanked. Instead of pulling away, Lydia laughed, a real laugh, unguarded, and gently extracted her hair from the baby's grip. She's gotten big, Lydia said, growing like a weed. Come in, come in. Tommy, take their coats. Inside was warm and smelled like roasting meat and fresh bread. The table was set with mismatched plates and chairs that didn't quite fit, but everything was clean and carefully arranged. John emerged from the back room, wiping his hands on a towel. Glad you could make it, he said, shaking Elias's hand. Was worried the roads might keep you away. Takes more than mud to stop us, Elias replied. They settled around the table, cramped but comfortable. Mary had made a roast with potatoes and carrots, and there was fresh bread still warm from the oven. Tommy kept sneaking glances at Lydia when he thought no one was looking, fascinated in the way children are before they learn to hide their curiosity. Tommy, Mary said sharply, mind your manners. Sorry, Ma. He looked at Lydia. I was just wondering, does it hurt? Your face? Tommy! But Lydia held up a hand. It's all right. It's a fair question. She turned to the boy. It did hurt. A lot. For a long time. Now it just feels strange sometimes. Tight, like the skin doesn't quite fit. But no, it doesn't hurt anymore. That's good, Tommy said seriously. I'm glad it doesn't hurt. Something in Lydia's expression softened. Thank you, Tommy. The meal progressed with surprising ease. John told stories about his attempts to fix the house, including one mishap with the ladder that had Mary laughing so hard she nearly choked. Tommy demonstrated his new ability to whistle, which mostly produced spit and determination. Sarah contributed by throwing food and giggling at the mess. Elias found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't in years. This was what normal looked like. What life looked like when you weren't constantly braced for the next disaster. He glanced at Lydia and caught her smiling at something Mary had said. Not the careful, controlled smile she usually wore, but something genuine. Something that reached her eyes. After dinner, Mary insisted on showing Lydia some fabric she'd gotten for making clothes for Sarah. I'm terrible at sewing, Mary admitted. Can barely make a straight line, but I thought maybe you could give me some pointers. They disappeared into the back room, leaving Elias with John and Tommy. She's good for you, John said quietly, once the women were out of earshot. What? Miss Cross, shh, she's good for you. I can see it. Elias didn't know how to respond to that. I know what you are. What I'm saying is, you could be more, if you wanted. It's not that simple. It never is. John poured them both coffee from a pot on the stove. But I've learned something in my years. Simple isn't the same as easy, and complicated isn't the same as impossible. That's very philosophical. I'm a very philosophical man, John grinned. Seriously, though, Mary and we've been through hell and back, lost 2 babies before Sarah, nearly lost everything in that storm. But you know what I learned? Life's too short to waste time being careful. You find someone who makes you want to be better, you hold on to them. What if holding on means making their life harder? Then you make it worth the hard parts. John took a sip of coffee. Look, I don't know your whole story. Don't need to. But I know what I saw that day at our house. 2 people who work together like they've been doing it for years, who trust each other when it matters. That's not something you find every day. Before Elias could respond, Lydia and Mary returned, laughing about something. Lydia caught his eye, and for a moment there was a question there. Are you okay? He nodded slightly. I'm okay. The ride home was different than the ride there, easier, lighter. Lydia sat closer to him on the wagon seat, not quite touching, but near enough that he could feel her warmth. That wasn't so bad, she said finally. No, it wasn't. Tommy's a sweet kid, asked good questions. Most kids would have just stared. Most adults do that too. At least kids are honest about it. She was quiet for a moment. Mary asked me something while we were looking at fabric. What's that? She asked if you and I were... Lydia paused. She asked if we were together, romantically. Elias's hands tightened on the reins. What did you tell her? I told her we had an arrangement, that you needed help with the ranch, and I needed a place to start over, that it wasn't romantic. Oh, but then she said something that stuck with me. She said, not yet doesn't mean not ever. Lydia glanced at him, and I realized she was right. I've been so busy protecting myself from what might happen that I haven't considered what could happen. And what could happen? She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was careful. I don't know yet, but I think I'd like to find out. Elias felt something in his chest expand, like a breath he'd been holding for years finally releasing. I'd like that too. They rode the rest of the way in silence, but it was the kind of silence that said everything words couldn't. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Elias was in the barn when he heard horses approaching. 3 of them, moving at a pace that suggested purpose rather than leisure. He set down the pitchfork and walked outside, shading his eyes against the sun. Victor Hale rode at the front, flanked by 2 men Elias didn't recognize. They were big, thick through the shoulders, with the kind of faces that suggested they got paid for intimidation. Elias, Victor said, not bothering to dismount. We need to talk. About what? About your situation here. With your housekeeper. Elias felt his jaw tighten. Lydia is none of your business. See, that's where you're wrong. Everything in this valley is my business. Victor leaned forward in his saddle. People are talking, saying things about you and that woman, saying it's not proper, her living here with you, saying it's an embarrassment to decent folk. Then decent folk should mind their own business. I tried being reasonable with you in town, tried to give you a chance to fix this quietly, but you made your choice, and now... Victor smiled that wolf smile. Now I'm making mine. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm offering you a deal, $500 for you to send her away, buy out her contract, pay her passage back to wherever she came from, and we'll all forget this unfortunate situation ever happened. The words landed like a punch. Elias felt anger surge up, hot and immediate. You're trying to pay me to get rid of her? I'm trying to help you save face before this gets worse. The only thing that's going to get worse is you if you don't get off my property. Victor's expression hardened. You're making a mistake. Seems to be a habit of mine lately. This isn't a joke, Elias. I have influence in this territory. I can make life very difficult for you. Loans called in. Contracts canceled. You'll find yourself unable to sell your livestock, unable to hire help. This ranch will fail, and you'll have nothing but that scarred woman for company. Then I guess I better make sure she's good company. One of Victor's men shifted in his saddle, hand moving toward something. A gun, probably. Elias saw it and felt fear spike through him. But underneath the fear was something else. Rage. Pure, clean rage at the audacity of this man coming to his home and threatening him. You pull that gun, Elias said quietly, and you better be prepared to use it, because I'm not backing down. The moment stretched out, taut as wire. Elias could hear his own heartbeat, loud in his ears. Could see the calculation in Victor's eyes, how far he was willing to push this, whether Elias was bluffing. Then a voice cut through the tension. Is there a problem here? They all turned. Lydia stood on the porch, holding a rifle. Not pointing it at anyone exactly, just holding it, casual, comfortable. Miss Cross, Victor said, recovering his composure, this doesn't concern you. Any conversation about me on my property concerns me. She came down the steps slowly. Now I'm going to ask one more time. Is there a problem? I was just offering your employer a business proposition. Nothing for you to worry about. $500 to make me disappear. I heard. She came to stand beside Elias. That's generous. Almost insulting, but generous. Victor's smile returned. A woman who knows her worth. Refreshing. So you'll take the offer? No. The smile faded. That's foolish. Maybe, but it's my choice to be foolish. She shifted the rifle slightly. Not threatening, but not threatening either. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to get back on your horses. You're going to ride off this property, and you're not going to come back with offers or threats or anything else. Because this is my home now, and I don't take kindly to people trying to buy me out of it. Your home? Victor laughed. Your hired help. Don't forget your place. My place, Lydia said, voice gone cold, is wherever I decide it is. And right now, it's right here. Victor looked between them, seeing something he didn't like. The unity. The partnership. The fact that he was outnumbered not in bodies, but in conviction. You're both fools, he said finally. And fools don't last long in Montana. Then I guess we'll die foolish. Elias stepped forward. Get off my land, Victor, now. For a moment, Victor looked like he might push it further. Then he wheeled his horse around and his men followed. They rode off at a gallop, kicking up mud and leaving nothing but threats hanging in the air. Elias waited until they were out of sight before turning to Lydia. You knew that was coming. Had a feeling. Men like him don't take no for an answer the first time. You could have accepted. $500. That's more money than most people see in years. I've been bought off before. Never again. She lowered the rifle. Besides, where would I go? Back to Kansas, where everyone knows my story? Forward to California, where no one knows me at all? At least here, I'm known. That counts for something. It counts for everything. She looked at him and something passed between them. An understanding, a recognition that they'd just crossed a line together, burned a bridge they couldn't uncross. He's going to make good on those threats, Lydia said quietly. I know. Your business, your reputation, he can damage both. I know that too. And you're okay with that? With losing everything because you wouldn't send me away? Elias reached out and took the rifle from her hands, setting it carefully against the porch rail. Then he looked at her, meeting her eyes with an honesty that made his chest ache. I've already lost everything once, he said. Losing it again doesn't scare me. But losing you, losing this chance at something real, that terrifies me. Lydia's breath caught. Elias, I'm not asking for anything, not asking you to feel what I feel or be what I want. I'm just telling you the truth. You matter to me. This matters. And I'm willing to fight for it. She stood very still, and he could see her processing it, weighing it, deciding whether to believe him. Then, slowly, she reached out and took his hand. Just that. Nothing more. Her calloused palm against his, their fingers interlacing. Okay, she whispered. Then we fight. They stood there on the porch, hands clasped, while the sun climbed higher and the world kept spinning. And for the first time since Martha died, Elias felt like he was standing on solid ground. The days after Victor's visit were tense. Elias went to town twice and found doors closing before he reached them. The feed store suddenly had no grain available. The blacksmith was too busy to look at his plow. Even the saloon, which would serve anyone with money, seemed uncomfortable having him there. Victor's influence was everywhere, and it was working exactly as promised. Elias came home from one particularly frustrating trip to find Lydia in the kitchen, kneading bread with more force than necessary. That bad? She asked without looking up. Getting there? We could go somewhere else, start over. Where? Victor's reach extends across most of the territory, and even if we went somewhere new, we'd just be running. I'm done running. She nodded slowly. So what do we do? We survive. We figure it out. He stopped, an idea forming. The Fletchers. What about them? They're not part of Victor's network. John's too small, too independent. And Mary, she doesn't strike me as someone who cares what Victor Hale thinks. You want to ask them for help? I want to see if they know others like them. People who don't bend to Victor's will. We build our own network, our own community, one that doesn't need his approval. Lydia looked at him and slowly, a smile spread across her face. That's either brilliant or completely insane. Probably both. Good thing I like both brilliant and insane. They rode to the Fletcher place the next morning with a proposition. John listened, Mary listened, and when they finished explaining, there was a long silence. Then John grinned. About time someone stood up to that man. Count us in. You don't have to... Yes, we do, Mary interrupted. People like Victor Hale only have power because everyone's too scared to say no. Well, I'm done being scared. It won't be easy. Nothing worth doing ever is. Over the next 2 weeks, the Fletchers introduced them to others. Small ranchers who'd been pushed around by Victor. Store owners who resented his monopolies. Families who were tired of being told how to live. One by one, they came together. Not out of any grand ideology, but because they were tired. Tired of bowing. Tired of hiding. Tired of letting fear make their decisions. It wasn't much. Maybe 20 families scattered across the valley. But it was enough to start building something. A farmers' cooperative that bypassed Victor's supply chains, shared resources and labor. A community that supported each other instead of competing. And at the center of it, unlikely as it seemed, were Elias and Lydia. They worked 18-hour days, coordinating efforts, mediating disputes, building trust. It was exhausting and frustrating and sometimes felt completely hopeless. But they did it together, and that made all the difference. One night, 3 weeks into their efforts, Elias found Lydia sitting on the porch steps, looking up at the stars. "You should be sleeping," he said. "So should you." He sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Think it'll work? What we're trying to build?" "I don't know. Maybe. Maybe not." She was quiet for a moment. "But I think we're proving something important." "What's that?" "That courage is contagious. You stand up, it makes it easier for someone else to stand up. And then another person. And another. Until suddenly you're not standing alone anymore." Elias thought about that. About all the people who'd joined their small rebellion. About Mary Fletcher saying she was done being scared. About John introducing them to his cousin, who introduced them to his neighbor, who knew someone else. "Martha would have liked you," he said suddenly. Lydia looked at him, surprised. "Yeah? Yeah, she always said the measure of a person wasn't what they did when things were easy, but what they did when things were hard. You've been through hell and you're still fighting. She would have respected that." "I would have liked to meet her." "She would have liked to meet you too." He smiled sadly. "Probably would have been friends. You're both stubborn as hell." Lydia laughed. "Is that what you like about me? My stubbornness?" The question was light, teasing, but underneath was something serious. A question she was actually asking. Elias turned to face her fully. "I like everything about you. The stubbornness, the courage, the way you make bread like it personally offended you. The way you don't back down even when you probably should. The way you see through my excuses and call me on them." That's quite a list. I could keep going. She was looking at him now, really looking, and he could see her breath coming faster. "Elias, I'm falling in love with you, Lydia. Maybe already have fallen. And I know that's not part of our arrangement, and I know it complicates things, but I needed you to know." For a long moment, she didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at him with an expression he couldn't read. Then she stood up abruptly. "I need to think." She went inside, leaving him alone on the porch with his heart pounding and the sick certainty that he'd just ruined everything. But upstairs, in her room, Lydia stood with her back against the door, hand pressed to her chest where her heart was hammering. Because the truth was, she was falling too. Had been falling for weeks now. And that was the most terrifying thing of all. Morning came gray and cold, the kind of dawn that felt more like an ending than a beginning. Elias had barely slept, replaying his confession over and over, wondering if there was a way he could have said it better, softer, less like throwing a grenade into something fragile. He found Lydia in the kitchen, already dressed, already working. She had flour on her hands and wouldn't look at him. "Coffee's ready," she said to the counter. "Thanks." He poured himself a cup and stood there, waiting. The silence stretched out, uncomfortable and thick. "About last night," he started. "I don't want to talk about it." "Lydia," I said, I don't want to talk about it." Her voice was sharp, but underneath was something else. Fear, maybe. Or panic. Can we just work today? Please?" He wanted to push, wanted to make her face it, but he'd learned enough about her to know that pushing never worked. "Okay, what do you need me to do?" "The north fence needs checking, and we're low on firewood." "I'll take care of it." He left before he could say something stupid, something desperate. Outside, the air was crisp enough to hurt his lungs, and he was grateful for it. Pain was easier than the mess inside his chest. He spent the morning working until his muscles ached, until the physical exhaustion drowned out everything else. But it didn't help. Nothing helped, because he'd finally been honest about what he wanted, and honesty had driven her away. Around noon, he heard a rider approaching. He turned, half expecting Victor or one of his men, but instead it was Tommy Fletcher, riding fast and looking scared. "Mr. Granger!" The boy pulled his horse up hard. "Pa sent me. Says you need to come quick." "What's wrong?" "It's Mr. Hale. He's at our place with a bunch of men. Says Pa owes him money for I don't know what. But he's saying he's going to take our livestock if we don't pay up." Elias felt his jaw tighten. "How much does your father owe him?" "Pa says he doesn't owe him anything. Says it's made up." Of course it was. This was Victor's next move, going after the people who'd aligned themselves with Elias and Lydia, hurting them to send a message. "Tell your father I'm coming. Tell him not to give Victor anything until I get there." Tommy nodded and wheeled his horse around, kicking it into a gallop. Elias ran back to the house and burst through the door. Lydia looked up, startled. "What?" "Victor's at the Fletcher place, trying to claim they owe him money. I need to go." She was already moving, untying her apron. "I'm coming with you." "You don't have to. Stop saying that. If this is about what you said last night, if you think I'm going to hide here while you deal with this alone, you're wrong." She grabbed her coat. "Whatever's between us, we figure it out later. Right now, the Fletchers need help." They rode hard, pushing the horses faster than was probably safe on muddy roads. When they reached the Fletcher place, they found Victor's men scattered around the property. 8 of them, all armed, all looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. Victor himself stood on the porch, talking down at John while Mary held Sarah tight against her chest. "Simple business," Victor was saying. "You bought feed from my suppliers last fall. Payments due. I paid for that feed in November," John said, voice shaking with anger. "You know I did. Got the receipt to prove it." "Then where is it? Show me this receipt." "It's in the house. Let me—" "You're not going anywhere until we settle this." Victor's hand moved to rest on his belt, near where a pistol sat. "Now, I'm willing to be reasonable. You can pay what you owe, or I can take equivalent value in livestock. Your choice." "I'm not giving you anything because I don't owe you anything." "John," Victor's voice went cold. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." That's when Elias and Lydia rode up, their horses' hooves loud in the tense silence. Victor turned, and his expression shifted from cold to amused. "Well, well, the hero arrives. Come to save the day, Elias." Elias dismounted slowly, deliberately. "Come to see what kind of man shakes down families for money they don't owe. I have documentation. You have forged documentation." Lydia's voice cut through as she dismounted. "We all know it. The question is whether you're stupid enough to push this when there are witnesses." Victor's men shifted uncomfortably. They'd signed up for intimidation, not robbery, and Lydia's words had named exactly what this was. "Careful, Miss Cross. Accusations like that can have consequences. So can extortion." She walked forward until she was standing between Victor and John. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to get off this property. You're going to tear up whatever fake invoice you're holding, and you're never going to try this again." "Or what? Or I ride into town and tell everyone exactly what you tried to do here. I tell them about the $500 you offered to make me disappear. I tell them about every dirty deal, every intimidation, every time you've used fear to get what you want." She smiled, and it wasn't kind. "I've got nothing to lose, Mr. Hale. No reputation to protect. No social standing to worry about. That makes me dangerous." Victor stared at her, and Elias could see him calculating, weighing his options, trying to figure out if she was bluffing. "You're making enemies you can't afford," Victor said finally. "I'm making the right enemies. There's a difference." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Victor gestured to his men. "Let's go. This isn't worth our time." They mounted up and rode off, but not before Victor turned back one last time. "This isn't over." "It never is with men like you," Lydia called after him. When they were gone, John let out a breath he'd been holding. "Thank you. Both of you. I don't know what would have happened if—" "Don't." Elias put a hand on his shoulder. "This is what we do now. We look out for each other." Mary came down from the porch, still holding Sarah. "He's going to keep coming. He's not going to stop until he's destroyed everyone who stands against him." "Then we better make sure there are too many of us to destroy," Lydia said. They spent the afternoon at the Fletcher place making plans. They needed to document everything, every intimidation attempt, every false claim, every witness who'd seen Victor's tactics. They needed to spread the word, get more people on their side, build something strong enough that Victor couldn't tear it down. It was exhausting work, and by the time they rode home, the sun was setting and both of them were too tired to talk. But as they approached the ranch, Elias finally broke the silence. "What you did today," he said. "Standing up to him like that? That took guts. Or stupidity. Why can't it be both?" She smiled slightly. "Fair point." They put the horses away in silence, working together with the easy coordination they'd developed. When they were done, they stood in the barn, both aware that they couldn't avoid the conversation anymore. "Elias," Lydia said finally, "about what you said last night. You don't have to. Let me finish." She took a breath. "I've spent 7 years telling myself I don't need anyone, that needing people only leads to pain. And then you showed up, or I showed up, I guess, and you made me want things I thought I'd given up on. That sounds like a good thing. It's terrifying." She met his eyes. "Because what happens when you realize what everyone else realized? That I'm too damaged, too difficult, too much work? What happens when you wake up one day and decide you made a mistake? That's not going to happen. You can't know that." "You're right. I can't." He took a step closer. "But I can promise to try. I can promise that if we're going to fail, it won't be because I gave up." "That's not enough." "I know, but it's all I've got." Lydia looked at him, and he could see her fighting with herself, wanting to believe but afraid to, wanting to trust but terrified of the consequences. "I need time," she said finally. "I need to know that this isn't just, that you're not just saying this because of what happened with Victor, because I stood up for you. This has nothing to do with Victor." "Then give me time to believe that." It hurt, but he nodded. "How much time?" "I don't know. Just don't push, please." "Okay." They went inside, and the house felt emptier than it had in weeks. They made dinner in silence, ate in silence, cleaned up in silence. When Lydia went upstairs, Elias sat alone in the parlor and wondered how love could feel so much like losing. The next 2 weeks were the hardest yet. They worked together, coordinated with their growing network, dealt with 3 more intimidation attempts from Victor. But between them, there was a wall that hadn't been there before. Lydia was polite, professional, distant. She gave him space, and the space felt like an ocean. Elias tried not to let it show, tried to focus on the work, on building something that mattered. But at night, lying awake in his room, he felt the weight of it crushing him. He'd finally opened his heart again after 3 years of it being closed, and now he was learning that open hearts bruise easier. On a Tuesday morning, a letter arrived. Elias recognized the seal, official territorial business. He opened it with a sense of dread and found exactly what he expected. Victor had filed a formal complaint, claiming Elias had threatened him, damaged his property, interfered with legitimate business. It was all lies, but lies with official documentation and powerful backing. There would be a hearing in 2 weeks. If Elias lost, he could face fines, possibly jail time, and definitely the loss of his ranch. He read the letter twice, then set it down carefully on the table. Lydia found him there an hour later, still staring at nothing. "What's wrong?" He handed her the letter without speaking. She read it, and he watched her face go from confused to angry to something harder, determined. "He's trying to destroy you," she said. "Us. He's trying to destroy us." "No." She set the letter down. "This is about you. If you'd sent me away like he wanted, none of this would be happening." "So what? I should have sacrificed you to save myself? Maybe you should have been smart instead of stubborn." He stood up, anger finally breaking through. "You think I regret this? You think I regret standing up to him, building something with these people, choosing you? Because I don't. Even if I lose everything, I don't regret it." "You're going to lose everything. Then I lose. But I lose on my terms, not his." They stared at each other, both breathing hard, both too angry and scared to back down. "This is my fault," Lydia said finally, voice breaking. "If I'd never come here, if you'd never—" Don't you dare finish that sentence." He crossed to her, grabbed her shoulders. "You are not the problem. You have never been the problem. The problem is men like Victor who think they can buy and sell people's lives. The problem is a world that taught you to think you're something to be ashamed of." "I am something to be ashamed of." "No. You're someone who survived something terrible and kept going. You're someone who risks her life for strangers. You're someone who stands up to powerful men with nothing but courage and a rifle. He was shaking her slightly, trying to make her see. You're the best thing that's happened to me in years, and I'm not going to let you blame yourself for other people's cruelty. Tears were streaming down her face now, both sides, scarred and whole. Why? Why do you care so much? Because I love you. I told you that. I meant it. You can't love me. Watch me. She made a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. You're an idiot. Probably. You're throwing your life away. It's my life to throw. She stared at him, and he could see something breaking in her. Some wall she'd built finally cracking under the pressure of someone refusing to give up on her. I'm so tired, she whispered. I'm so tired of being scared all the time. Then stop being scared. Be brave instead. I don't know how. Yes, you do. You've been doing it your whole life. He pulled her into his arms, and for a moment she was stiff, resistant. Then she collapsed against him, sobbing into his chest, and he held her while 7 years of pain came pouring out. When she finally stopped crying, when the tears dried up and left her hollow and exhausted, she pulled back just enough to look up at him. I love you too, she said. I've been trying not to, but I do. And it's the most terrifying thing I've ever felt. He cupped her face in his hands, both sides scarred and whole, and kissed her. It was gentle and desperate and tasted like salt from her tears. She kissed him back like she was drowning and he was air. When they finally broke apart, they were both shaking. What do we do now? She asked. We fight, together. We're going to lose. Maybe. Probably. But we lose together, and that matters. She nodded against his chest. Okay, together. They spent the next 2 weeks preparing for the hearing. They gathered witnesses, documented every interaction with Victor, built a case that was solid, if not airtight. Mary and John stood with them. Tommy practiced his testimony until he could recite it without hesitation. Others from their network came forward with their own stories of Victor's intimidation. It should have felt hopeless. Victor had money, influence, the ear of every important person in the territory. They had truth and not much else. But Elias had never felt more alive. The night before the hearing, he and Lydia sat on the porch steps, watching stars appear one by one. She was leaning against him, his arm around her shoulders, and it felt so natural it was hard to remember a time when this hadn't been their truth. Whatever happens tomorrow, she said quietly, I want you to know something. What's that? You changed my life. You gave me a reason to stop hiding, to start living again. She turned to look at him. Even if we lose everything tomorrow, these months with you, they were worth it. We're not going to lose. You don't know that. No, but I know we're going to fight like hell, and that counts for something. She smiled. You've gotten very optimistic lately. I've got reasons to be optimistic. Like what? Like you. Like this. He gestured at the land around them. Like a community of people who decided they were tired of being afraid. That's not nothing. No, she agreed. That's not nothing. They sat in silence, holding on to each other, gathering strength for what was coming. Inside, the house they'd built together waited. Tomorrow, they'd find out if they got to keep it. Tonight, they had this moment, and that was enough. The hearing was held in the largest building in Bitterroot, the town hall, which doubled as a courthouse when needed. By the time Elias and Lydia arrived, it was already packed. Victor sat at the front with his lawyer, a sharp-faced man from the territorial capital. On the other side, Elias and Lydia sat alone. No lawyer, just their truth and their witnesses. The magistrate was a gray-haired man named Caldwell, known for being fair but also for not wanting to make waves. He looked at the packed room and sighed like he already regretted taking this case. Mr. Hale, he began, you've brought charges of threatening behavior, property damage, and interference with business against Mr. Granger. Present your evidence. Victor's lawyer stood and painted a picture of Elias as a dangerous man, unstable after his wife's death, prone to violence and intimidation. He had witnesses, people Elias had never met, who claimed to have seen him threatening Victor, damaging fences, turning others against legitimate business interests. It was all lies, but they were convincing lies, told with confidence, and backed by official-looking documents. When it was Elias's turn, he stood and told the truth. About Victor's offer to pay Lydia to leave, about the intimidation attempts, about the fake invoice at the Fletcher place. One by one, his witnesses came forward: John, Mary, Tommy, and others. They told their stories simply and honestly. But Elias could see Caldwell's face, could see the calculation there. Victor had power. Victor had money. Victor had influence. And Elias had nothing but people Victor could easily dismiss as malcontents and troublemakers. Then Lydia stood up. "May I speak?" she asked. Caldwell looked surprised. "You're not on trial, Miss Cross." "No, but this is about me, so I should get to speak." He hesitated, then nodded. "Go ahead." Lydia walked to the front of the room. In the packed hall, every eye was on her. She could feel them staring, judging, whispering. The old fear tried to rise up, tried to make her small. She pushed it down. "My name is Lydia Cross," she began. "I came to Montana 4 months ago to work for Mr. Granger. I came because I needed a fresh start, and he offered me one. That's all this was supposed to be, a simple arrangement between two people who needed help." She paused, looking around the room. "But it became more than that. Not because we planned it, but because we learned something important. We learned that fear is a choice, that letting powerful people control you through intimidation is a choice. And we chose differently." "Miss Cross," Caldwell interrupted, "this isn't—" "Let me finish." Her voice was sharp. "Mr. Hale tried to buy me. When that didn't work, he tried to intimidate us. When that didn't work, he came after our friends. And when that didn't work, he made up charges to destroy us legally. And you know what? I'm done pretending this is about anything other than what it is. A powerful man who can't stand being told no." The room was dead silent. "So here's what I'm asking," Lydia continued. "I'm asking you to look at the evidence. Really look at it. Ask yourself why Mr. Hale cares so much about what happens on a small ranch. Ask yourself why he's willing to spend this much time and money destroying someone who threatened his pride. And ask yourself what kind of territory you want to live in. One where power wins, or one where truth matters?" She walked back to her seat and sat down, hands shaking, but head high. Caldwell was quiet for a long time. Then he looked at Victor. "Mr. Hale, I'm going to ask you directly. Did you offer Miss Cross money to leave Mr. Granger's employ?" Victor's lawyer started to object, but Victor held up a hand. "I made a business proposition. That's not illegal." "And the Fletcher incident, the invoice?" "A legitimate debt that they claim to have already paid. Then they should produce the receipt." John stood up. "I can produce it. It's right here." He held up a piece of paper. "Paid in full, November 15th. Got your own clerk's signature on it." Victor's face darkened. That's proof you lied," Caldwell said quietly. "Mr. Hale, I've known you for 20 years. I've seen you do a lot of questionable things in the name of business. But this," he gestured at the packed room, "this is different. You didn't just go after one man. You went after a community. These people are citizens of this territory, and they have rights, whether you like it or not." Caldwell stood up. "I'm dismissing all charges against Mr. Granger. Furthermore, I'm issuing a formal warning to you, Mr. Hale. One more complaint like this, one more incident of intimidation or fraud, and there will be consequences. Real ones. Am I clear?" Victor's face was red with fury, but he nodded curtly. "This hearing is concluded." The room erupted. People were cheering, shaking hands, hugging each other. Elias sat frozen, unable to process that they'd actually won. That truth had actually mattered. Then Lydia grabbed his face and kissed him, right there in front of everyone, and the room got even louder. When they finally broke apart, both of them were crying and laughing at the same time. "We won," she whispered. "We won." Outside, people crowded around them, offering congratulations and support. Mary was crying, John was grinning, Tommy was jumping up and down with excitement. It felt like a celebration, like victory, like the beginning of something real. But as they were getting ready to leave, Victor approached. His men flanked him, and his face was hard. "Enjoy this," he said quietly, "because it's the last victory you'll have." Elias stepped forward, putting himself between Victor and Lydia. "You done yet? Or do you need to lose a few more times before you figure out we're not backing down?" "This isn't over." "Yes, it is. Because even if you come after us again, there are 20 families now who'll stand with us. 40 next month, 100 by winter. You can't intimidate all of us, Victor. You're not that powerful. For the first time, Elias saw uncertainty in Victor's eyes. The realization that the world was changing, that the old ways weren't working anymore. Victor turned and walked away without another word. Elias watched him go, then turned to Lydia. She was smiling, really smiling, and it transformed her whole face. "Take me home," she said. "Gladly." They rode back to the ranch with the sun setting behind them, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. When they got there, they stood in the yard for a moment, just looking at it. The house that had been hollow was full now. The land that had been dead was coming back to life. "We did it," Lydia said. "We did." She turned to him. "So what now?" "Now?" He pulled her close. "Now we live. Really live. Together." That sounds perfect. And standing there in the fading light, holding each other, they both believed it might actually be true. The victory celebration lasted 3 days. People kept showing up at the ranch with food, drink, stories about standing up to their own small tyrannies. Mary Fletcher baked enough bread to feed half the valley. John brought whiskey he'd been saving for a special occasion. Even strangers came, people who'd heard what happened and wanted to see the couple who'd faced down Victor Hale and won. But by the 4th morning, the house was quiet again. Just Elias and Lydia sitting at the kitchen table with coffee and the strange, hollow feeling that comes after adrenaline fades. "So," Lydia said, "what do we do now? What do you want to do?" She thought about it, tracing the rim of her cup with one finger. "I want to stop waiting for the next disaster. I want to stop looking over my shoulder. I want—" She paused. "I want to build something permanent, something that lasts." Elias reached across the table and took her hand. "Then that's what we'll do." "Just like that?" "Just like that." She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "You make it sound easy." "It won't be easy, but we've already done the hard part." "Which part was that?" "Choosing each other. Everything else is just details." She laughed, and this time it was real. "You've gotten philosophical in your old age." "I'm 38. Ancient." They sat in comfortable silence, and Elias realized this was what he'd been missing for 3 years. Not grand declarations or dramatic gestures, just the quiet comfort of having someone to sit with. Someone who knew your worst parts and stayed anyway. That afternoon, they rode into town together. It was the first time since the hearing, and Elias wasn't sure what to expect. Would people still be supportive, or had the victory worn off, leaving just the uncomfortable reality of a scarred woman and the man who loved her? But when they arrived, Mrs. Patterson was standing outside her store, rearranging a display. She saw them and hesitated, clearly wrestling with something. Then she walked over. "Mr. Granger? Miss Cross?" Her voice was stiff, formal. "I wanted to say I was wrong about the things I said, the judgments I made. That wasn't Christian of me." Lydia studied her. "Why are you telling us this?" "Because my daughter was at the hearing. She came home and asked me why I'd been so cruel to someone who'd done nothing wrong. And I didn't have a good answer." Mrs. Patterson looked at Lydia directly for the first time. "I let fear of what others thought guide my actions. That was cowardly." "Yes," Lydia said. "It was." Mrs. Patterson flinched but didn't look away. "I'd like to do better, if you're willing to give me the chance." Lydia glanced at Elias, then back at Mrs. Patterson. "One chance. That's all anyone gets with me." "That's fair." They shook hands, awkward and uncertain, but it was a start. As they walked away, Elias squeezed Lydia's hand. "That was generous of you." "No, it was practical. We can't build a life here if everyone hates us. Might as well accept peace offerings when they come." "Still generous." "Don't get used to it. I'm still mean as hell." He kissed her temple. "I'm counting on it." Over the next weeks, something shifted in Bitterroot. Not overnight, not dramatically, but gradually. People who'd avoided them started nodding hello. Shopkeepers became friendlier. Children stopped staring, or at least stopped making it obvious. It wasn't acceptance exactly, more like tolerance with the potential for something better. But in a small Montana town in 1885, tolerance was a victory worth celebrating. The cooperative they'd started with the Fletchers grew. More farmers joined, pooling resources and labor. They built a shared grain silo, organized group purchasing, started a rotating work schedule so no one had to tackle big projects alone. It wasn't revolutionary, but it was working. Victor kept his distance, though Elias saw him in town occasionally. They'd exchange cold nods, enemies who'd learned to coexist if not reconcile. Elias suspected Victor was planning something, waiting for another opportunity, but he couldn't live his life in fear of what might happen. One evening, in late spring, Elias found Lydia in the garden planting seeds for summer vegetables. She'd taken to gardening with the same fierce determination she applied to everything, and the results were starting to show. Green shoots pushed through dark soil, promising abundance. "I've been thinking," he said. "Dangerous habit. About us. About what we are." She sat back on her heels, wiping dirt from her hands. "What are we? Partners, friends, people who love each other." He paused. "But we're not married." Lydia's expression went carefully neutral. "No, we're not. Does that bother you? Does it bother you? I'm asking first." She stood up, brushing off her skirt. "Marriage didn't work out so well for me the first time. Or the almost first time, anyway. The man I was engaged to took one look at my face after the fire and decided I wasn't worth keeping. So no, Elias, I'm not particularly eager to try again." "What if it was different this time?" "How could it be different?" He stepped closer. "Because I'm not him. Because I've seen you at your worst and your best, and I want all of it. Because when I picture my future, you're in every single part of it. That's not a proposal. Good, because I'm not proposing yet. Yet, I'm building up to it." He took her hands, dirt and all. "I need you to know something first. I don't want to marry you because it's proper, or because people expect it, or because it makes our arrangement more respectable. I want to marry you because spending the rest of my life with you is the only future that makes sense to me." Tears were starting in her eyes. "You don't have to—" "Yes, I do, because you need to hear it. You need to know that you're not someone I'm settling for or making do with. You're who I choose. Every day. Every moment. Elias. So when I do propose, and I will, it won't be about fixing anything or making anything official. It'll be about promising to keep choosing you, no matter what comes. Understood?" She was crying now, really crying, and nodding at the same time. "Understood. Good." He kissed her, tasting salt and dirt and everything good in the world. "Now get back to your garden. Those carrots won't plant themselves." She laughed through her tears and shoved him. "Get out of here. You're ruining the moment." "I thought I was making the moment. You're terrible at moments. But you love me anyway." "Unfortunately." He left her there, smiling and crying and planting seeds for a future they'd build together. Inside, he went to the bedroom and pulled out a small box he'd hidden in the back of his drawer. The ring inside had been Martha's, simple gold with a small stone. He'd thought about buying something new, but this felt right. Martha would have approved of Lydia, would have told him to stop being an idiot and marry her already. 2 weeks later, on a Sunday morning, they rode to the spot where they'd saved the ewe and her lamb during the storm. The fence had been repaired, the snow was gone, and wildflowers covered the ground in riots of color. "Why are we here?" Lydia asked. "Because this is where I realized I couldn't lose you, where I decided that whatever it took, whatever I had to do, I wasn't going to let fear win anymore." He dismounted and helped her down. Seemed like a good place for this. He pulled out the ring box and got down on one knee. Lydia's hand came up to her mouth. "Lydia Cross, you're stubborn and difficult, and you scare the hell out of me sometimes. You're also the bravest, strongest, most infuriating person I've ever met. You make me want to be better. You make me want to fight for things I'd given up on. You make me want to live instead of just surviving." He opened the box. "Marry me. Not because you have to, not because it makes sense, but because we love each other and life's too short to waste time being careful." She was crying again, but smiling too. "That's the worst proposal I've ever heard. It's honest. It's terrible. Is that a yes or a no?" "It's a yes, you idiot." She dropped to her knees in front of him. "It's a yes." He slipped the ring on her finger. It fit perfectly, and kissed her while the wind blew through the grass and birds sang overhead, and the world kept turning like it always did. Indifferent to human drama, but beautiful anyway. They were married 6 weeks later in a ceremony that was half celebration, half community gathering. The Fletchers hosted it at their place since they had more room. Mary decorated with wildflowers and ribbon. John built extra tables for the food people kept bringing. Tommy practiced a speech until Elias told him he didn't need to give one, much to the boy's relief. The magistrate Caldwell agreed to officiate, surprising everyone, including himself. Never thought I'd see the day I married the couple who caused the biggest uproar this territory's seen in years, he said. But here we are. Nearly everyone from the cooperative came, plus others who'd heard about it and wanted to show support. Even Mrs. Patterson arrived with a gift, a tablecloth she'd embroidered herself, cream-colored with yellow flowers around the edges. For your kitchen, she said, the colors you picked that day. Lydia took it, clearly moved. Thank you. You're welcome, and Miss Cross, Mrs. Granger, I suppose. I hope you'll be happy here. I already am. Victor Hale didn't attend, but nobody expected him to. His absence was noted and not mourned. The ceremony itself was simple. No fancy dresses or elaborate rituals, just two people making promises to each other in front of witnesses who mattered. When Caldwell asked if anyone objected, there was a beat of tense silence before John shouted, "Get on with it!" and everyone laughed. Elias's hands shook when he slipped the ring on Lydia's finger. It was already there, but the ceremony called for the gesture, and Lydia's voice cracked when she said her vows. They kissed, people cheered, and then it was done. They were married, officially, legally, completely. The celebration went late into the night. There was music, dancing, more food than anyone could eat. Tommy got into the whiskey and had to be carried home by his father. Sarah took her first steps, much to Mary's delight and terror. Someone started a bonfire, and people gathered around it telling stories until the stars came out. Elias and Lydia slipped away from the crowd for a moment, finding a quiet spot near the barn. She leaned against him, and he wrapped his arms around her, both of them watching their friends and neighbors celebrate. "You okay?" he asked. "More than okay. She paused, searching for the word. "I'm home. For the first time in 7 years, I actually feel like I'm home." "Good. Because you are." They stood there in the dark, holding each other, and Elias thought about how far they'd come. From that first day at the train station, both of them scared and damaged and barely holding on, to this, a community, a partnership, a love that had survived everything thrown at it. The road hadn't been smooth, there had been pain, fear, moments where it would have been easier to give up. But they'd fought for this, both of them, together. That was worth something, maybe worth everything. The first year of marriage wasn't easy. Living together, truly together, meant navigating all the small conflicts they'd avoided before. Elias left tools lying around. Lydia reorganized things without telling him. He woke up early, she preferred to sleep late. She wanted to save every penny, he thought some things were worth spending on. They fought. Not often, but when they did, it was fierce. Both of them were stubborn, both used to doing things their own way. But they learned when to push and when to let go. Learned that being right wasn't as important as being together. Learned that love wasn't a feeling that carried you through. It was a choice you made every single day. The cooperative continued to grow. By the end of the first year, they had 40 families involved. By the end of the second year, nearly 70. They'd built shared infrastructure, a workshop, a medical clinic staffed by a retired doctor from back east, even a small school where Tommy and other children could learn. Victor tried to interfere a few times, but his power was waning. The old ways, intimidation, monopolies, fear, didn't work on people who'd learned they were stronger together. Eventually, he seemed to accept it, retreating into his own empire and leaving theirs alone. In the third year, Lydia got pregnant. She told Elias on a Tuesday morning, standing in the kitchen with flour on her hands and terror in her eyes. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Me too. What if something goes wrong? What if I can't?" "Then we'll figure it out together." "You say that like it's easy." "It's not easy, but it's simple." He pulled her close. "We've survived everything else. We'll survive this too." The pregnancy was hard. Lydia was sick for months, exhausted and frustrated and convinced something would go wrong. Elias did his best to help, but there were some things he couldn't fix, some fears he couldn't ease. Mary became a constant presence, helping with the house, talking Lydia through the fears. "I lost 2 before Sarah," she admitted one day. "Thought I'd never have a baby that lived. But here we are. What if mine doesn't live? Then you'll grieve, and it'll be awful, and you'll survive because that's what we do. But Lydia, you can't live your whole pregnancy in fear of what might happen. You've got to hope for what will happen." I'm not good at hope. Neither was I. But I learned. The baby came in February, exactly 3 years after Martha had died. A girl, small but healthy, with a strong cry and her mother's determination. They named her Clara, after Lydia's mother. Elias held his daughter for the first time and felt something shift in his chest. This tiny person, red-faced and squalling, was his responsibility, his future, his reason to keep being brave. "She's perfect," he whispered. "She's wrinkled and angry," Lydia said from the bed, exhausted but smiling. "That too." Clara changed everything and nothing. The house got louder, messier, filled with a chaos that was somehow exactly right. Elias learned to function on no sleep. Lydia learned to accept help from others. Together, they learned that parenthood was terrifying and wonderful and completely consuming. Mary and John visited often, bringing Sarah to play with Clara, even though Clara was too young to do much more than stare. Tommy, now 16 and shooting up like a weed, became an unofficial older brother, protective and proud. On Clara's first birthday, they threw a party at the ranch. Nearly everyone from the cooperative came, plus people from town who'd gradually become friends rather than just neighbors. The house couldn't hold everyone, so they spilled out into the yard, children running wild while adults talked and laughed. Elias stood on the porch, watching it all, and felt Lydia come up beside him. Clara was on her hip, getting crumbs everywhere from the cake she'd been allowed to destroy. "What are you thinking?" Lydia asked. "That 4 years ago this house was dead. I was dead. And now—" He gestured at the chaos. "Now look at it. We did good, didn't we? We did great." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I'm glad I got on that train." "So am I. Even though I complicated your life? Especially because you complicated my life. Easy isn't worth having." Clara grabbed a fistful of his hair and yanked. He winced, but didn't pull away, just gently extracted her hand and kissed it. She giggled, delighted, and reached for him again. "She's going to be trouble," Lydia said. "With us as parents. Absolutely. Poor kid never had a chance." "Nope." They went back inside together, joining the celebration. And Elias thought about everything he'd learned over these years. About courage being a choice, not a feeling. About love being work, not magic. About community being built through showing up, day after day, even when it was hard. He thought about Martha, who'd loved him despite his flaws and taught him what partnership could be. About Lydia, who'd shown him that starting over was possible, that fear didn't have to win. About Clara, who represented a future he'd stopped believing in. Life wasn't perfect. There were still hard days, still conflicts, still moments of doubt. Victor was still out there, diminished, but not gone. The ranch still demanded everything they had. Money was always tight, the work was always hard, and Montana winters were still brutal. But they had each other. They had their community. They had a daughter who was learning from her first breath that love was stronger than fear, that courage was worth the risk, that being different wasn't something to hide, but something to own. That night, after everyone left and Clara was finally asleep, Elias and Lydia collapsed on the couch together, exhausted. "I'm getting too old for parties," Lydia groaned. "You're 32. "Ancient." He pulled her closer. "Thank you." "For what?" "For choosing me. For staying. For building this life with me." She was quiet for a moment. "You know what the hardest part was? Not falling in love with you, not deciding to marry you, not even having Clara." "What was it?" "Believing I deserved it. Believing I deserved to be happy, to be loved, to have all of this." She touched her scarred face. "I spent so long thinking this made me unworthy of good things, and then you came along and made me question everything I thought I knew. You were always worthy, you just couldn't see it. Maybe. Or maybe I needed someone to show me." She looked up at him. "Either way, I'm glad it was you." "Me too." They sat in the quiet house holding each other, and Elias realized this was the moment he'd been waiting for. Not the wedding, not Clara's birth, not any of the big milestones. Just this. A quiet evening with the woman he loved, both of them scarred and tired and absolutely certain they were exactly where they needed to be. Years passed. Clara grew into a fierce, curious child who asked too many questions and refused to take no for an answer. A son followed, then another daughter. The house that had been empty filled with noise and love and the beautiful chaos of children who knew they were wanted. The cooperative thrived, becoming the foundation of the community. They built a meeting hall, started a newspaper, organized social events that brought people together. What had started as a handful of families standing against intimidation became something bigger, proof that ordinary people could build extraordinary things when they worked together. Victor Hale died when Clara was 7. Heart attack, they said, though some whispered it was anger that killed him. Anger at a world that had moved on without his permission. His empire was divided among his children, who lacked his ruthlessness and gradually sold off pieces until there was nothing left but stories of what had been. Elias and Lydia grew older together, their bodies showing the wear of hard work in Montana winters. But their partnership only deepened. They learned each other's rhythms, finished each other's sentences, moved through life with the ease of people who'd chosen each other every single day. On their 20th anniversary, their children threw them a party. Clara, now married with a baby of her own, gave a toast that made both her parents cry. "My parents taught me something important," she said, raising her glass. "They taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to move forward despite it. That love isn't a feeling that happens to you. It's a choice you make every day. And that the scars we carry, whether visible or not, don't define us. How we live with them does." She looked at her mother, at the scars that had faded with time but never disappeared. "Mom, you taught me to be brave, to stand up when it's hard, to never let anyone make me small." Then at her father. "Dad, you taught me that real strength is admitting you were wrong and trying to be better. That protecting the people you love sometimes means facing the things you fear." She raised her glass higher. "To my parents, who proved that broken people can build beautiful things, who showed all of us what it means to really live. Happy anniversary." Everyone drank, cheered, and the party continued. But Elias and Lydia slipped away to the porch, the same porch where they'd stood so many times over the years, watching the land change with the seasons. 20 years, Lydia said. "Best 20 years of my life." "Even the hard parts?" "Especially the hard parts. That's when we learned what we were really made of." She leaned against him, and they stood in comfortable silence. The sun was setting, painting the sky in colors that reminded Elias of that first sunset after Lydia arrived, when he'd been too scared to see what was possible. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Getting on that train? Taking a chance on a broken rancher in the middle of nowhere?" "Every day," she said, then laughed at his expression. "I'm kidding. No, Elias. I've never regretted it. Not once. Even when it was hard, even when I was scared, even when I wanted to run, I've never regretted choosing you." "Good, because I'd do it all again, every single moment." "Even the part where I nearly got you killed facing down Victor?" "Especially that part. That's when I knew we'd be okay, that we could survive anything as long as we did it together." She turned to face him, and he saw the girl who'd stepped off the train with her walls up and her scars visible, and the woman she'd become, confident, loved, certain of her place in the world. The scars were still there, would always be there, but they'd become just one part of her story instead of the whole thing. "I love you," she said, "in case I haven't mentioned it lately." "I love you too, in case you forgot." They kissed, long and slow, while their children and grandchildren celebrated inside and the sun sank below the horizon. And in that moment, everything they'd fought for, everything they'd built, everything they'd survived, it all felt worth it. Because here's what Elias had learned in 20 years of marriage, of partnership, of choosing love over fear every single day. Perfection was a lie. Life was messy and hard and often painful. People were flawed and difficult and scared. But courage was possible. Change was possible. Love, real, deep, complicated love, was possible. You just had to be willing to fight for it. To show up day after day, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. Lydia had taught him that. Had shown him through her own life that surviving wasn't the same as living, that hiding was safe but hollow, that the only way to truly exist was to step into the world and dare it to break you. And sometimes it did break you. Sometimes life was cruel and unfair and left scars that never fully healed. But those scars were proof you'd lived, proof you'd fought, proof you'd loved deeply enough to risk losing everything. That was the choice they'd both made all those years ago. Not to hide from pain, but to build something beautiful in spite of it. Not to let fear dictate their lives, but to choose courage even when courage was terrifying. Not to settle for survival, but to fight for a life worth living. And they'd won. Not perfectly, not easily, but completely. The house behind them was full of people they loved. The land beneath their feet was theirs, earned through sweat and tears and stubborn refusal to give up. The future ahead held uncertainty, as futures always did, but they'd face it together. That was enough. More than enough. That was everything. "Come on," Lydia said finally, pulling away from the kiss. "We should get back to the party. They're probably wondering where we went." "Let them wonder." "Elias Granger, are you suggesting we abandon our own anniversary party?" "I'm suggesting we take a moment to appreciate what we built. The party can wait." She smiled, and it was the same smile she'd given him that night in the barn during the storm, when they'd saved the lamb and started believing in possibilities. "Okay, one more minute." They stood together on the porch, watching the last light fade from the sky. Two people who'd learned that love wasn't about finding someone perfect. It was about finding someone willing to fight for you, to grow with you, to choose you every single day despite knowing all your flaws. And as the stars came out one by one, covering the Montana sky in light, Elias thought about that train station all those years ago. About the moment he'd almost walked away, almost let fear win. About how close he'd come to missing all of this. But he hadn't walked away. He'd chosen courage instead. And that choice, that single moment of bravery, had changed everything. Inside, someone called their names. The party was waiting. Life was waiting. Lydia squeezed his hand. "Ready?" "Always." They walked back inside together, into the warmth and noise and beautiful chaos of a life they'd built from nothing. A life that proved broken things could be made whole, that scared people could learn to be brave, that love, real, complicated, hard-won love, was always, always worth fighting for. And in a house that had once been hollow, in a valley that had once been silent, surrounded by people who'd learned that courage was contagious and fear could be defeated, Elias Granger and Lydia Cross, two damaged people who'd found each other in the middle of nowhere, lived the rest of their lives exactly as they'd promised, together.